Many years ago, when I was in seminary, I was talking with some minister and student friends right after service. And one of us noticed that my friend Ray, who had been running the Sunday school at that time, had some glitter on his sweater. And we decided at that moment that whatever the question, you should add sparkles. Sparkles make everything better. And that was like 7 years ago, and I still think that sparkles is a good addition to most everything. I went specifically to wear a sparkly scarf today, and Sue got the memo because she wore sparklies today too. She didn't even know. You did. It was a mind meld thing. However, if you've been around me very long, you know that the thing that I think that really, really applies to every situation, even more than sparkles, is prayer and meditation. You laugh because you're like, oh yeah, I heard you say that before, yeah. Should I buy this car? Pray and meditate. Should I take this chance? Pray and meditate. What does this something mean to me? Pray and meditate. It's always the answer, right? So, however, there are miles and miles of mountains and speed bumps on the route to making meditation happen. And I've heard all of them because I have used all of them. I am a veteran meditation, avoider. Veteran. But I have graduated. Because I think that, you all chose to get up and come here this morning, even though it feels like it's an hour earlier than it is, because you're on a spiritual path, or you want to be on a spiritual path, and so you're here because of that. And so, prayer meditation. We talked about this in class on Wednesday, how we can, if we keep just sort of keep our heads down and let ourselves be distracted by all the things that are going on in the world, that's great, because then we can't hear our higher calling, because there's so much noise from all the input that we allow. We have to always have distractions. But when we stop that and we start taking the time for prayer and meditation, when we start turning off the distractions and just being, oops, now you can hear your calling. And then once you hear it, then you're going to have to do something about it. And that's a lot of work. And it's much more comfortable sometimes to just go with the status quo, right? And so that's something we talked about in class, which I thought really fit well with this theme of mindfulness and spiritual practice as one of our tools in our toolbox for the season of nonviolence and creating more peace and harmony in our world. So, we're all here because we want to have a more peaceful and loving, harmonious life, right? And that's why we're here. So, we have lots of proof that when we do spiritual practice, when we actively engage in spiritual practice, it changes our life. And we have scores and scores of personal anecdotes. You've heard them. You've seen little videos of them on YouTube. This is not new. You've heard lots of people talk about how they've had spiritual awakenings and it's changed their lives, right? Heard the story. Lots of different ways. And if that won't convince you, how about some science? We got science too. So isn't it cool what they can do with brain scans now? They can see what's going on in there. And so now we have scientific proof of what the gurus have been telling us for millennia. Sometimes it takes science. So they did an 8-week mindfulness. They used volunteers, not regular meditators, and they had them do a meditation, mindfulness practice. And over 8 weeks, their gray matter regions expanded. And these are the areas that were involved in learning and memory, emotion regulation, and being able to take perspective. It's pretty good stuff. And you know, when you think about people you know who are deeply engaged in spiritual practice, that's what they seem to be able to remember things, and they seem to be able to have a more smooth emotional experience and be able to be really present, right? And then, so that's one study, just regular folks like you and I. And then they also put some long-time meditator Buddhist monks, people with tens of thousands of hours of meditation under their belts. That's a lot of meditation. They put them in the MRIs and the brain scanners, and what they found is that they had a more active prefrontal cortex, which is where you process happiness. Hey, they had increased neuroplasticity, which means that they are able to adapt, their brains are able to adapt to new environments and stuff. Their brain waves are more powerful. They had enhanced focus, memory, learning, and neural coordination. And they also had no anxiety or depression, addiction, etc. So, if all the people's telling you that they had a great experience and it's changed their life isn't good enough, there's some science. So, that's a great idea, but now what, right? So I thought, as we're talking about this idea of mindfulness, I would just say, here's a bunch of different ways, because the truth is that what works for one person is not going to work for another person. It's not going to, and then there's this other third person out here, and we all have different ways, and it's sort of like different doors into the same room, I think. And I think once you come in this door, then some of the other doors become easier to try, but it takes, you got to find your door kind of into that spiritual practice, and then it's easier to kind of add another one. So some of you are doing some type of spiritual practice. This is a review of some of the other doors you could try out, and maybe you'll hear a door that you never even heard of before. Probably you haven't, because I talk about this stuff all the time. But just in case. And, you know, it's not just about the time that you sit and meditate. It's about having that aware consciousness all the time, or moving into that. And so one tool that I think is really interesting and fun for mindfulness is there's an app you can get if you have a smartphone. It's called the Mindfulness Bell. And you can set it up to ring. There's all sorts of different settings. You can set it for what time of day, parts of the day, and how often, and all these things. But it just rings randomly throughout the day. And when it dings, it's a nice singing bowl type sound. You stop and you breathe. And you can decide if you want to have any sort of ritual around that or not, but you just let it remind you to become present and to notice where you're at, you know, emotionally. I mean, you can notice where you're at physically too, but just to notice where you are and to come back to center. And so I used to have it, and it went off all the time. And then when it went off all the time, you start to ignore it, right? And so I dialed it back a little bit, so it was less frequent, which made me notice it more. So that's a really great little app. And if you don't have a smartphone, you can, or you don't want to use the app, you can find some other trigger in your day that might remind you to stop and be present. Whatever that is, you know, is there something that you see several times throughout your day that you could put a little sticky on there to remind you, breathe. And it's just about remembering to come back. It's not let all of the busyness of the day be in charge all the time. There's still plenty of things to do, and that's fine. But remember where the truth is. Another door is through sacred readings. Some people like to read the daily word every day, or they like to read other spiritual texts. You know, Unity is always cranking out these booklets. This is the Advent booklet, but there's always more booklets. We have a whole library of booklets if you want to borrow them and read them and be inspired. Lots of, but after you read it, don't just like read it and be like, okay, great, off you go. Why don't you take a moment and think about it? Maybe journal even. What did this mean to me? Or what did it came to me when I read this? Or if it's your own book, write in the margins. Don't you love that? When you think this, and then you go back and look at it later and you're like, oh wow, yeah. And now it means this to me. To engage in that reflection process. And then, of course, there's mandalas. Coloring has become, it's like a thing right now. But I'm not talking about coloring, just coloring and being like doing our other things, but to really take a coloring or a mandala into a spiritual practice. When I do mandalas, I try to disengage from making it right or using my training, my art training to make the colors complementary and all of that stuff, because you can get caught up in all of that and making it look pretty. And I just flip through my book and be like, that one looks like a good one to do today, and I do that, and that's the one I do. And then I go, what color would like to start and where would it like to go? And just to really just be in a place of just like one step and then the next step and the next step. I'm not saying you can't completely turn off your arty mind, but try not to make it about that, you know, just like to be about being present with filling this space with this color. Or anything that you can create like that without having to put a lot of thought into it, to just be present to it, can be a really excellent practice. And like all of this, there's no way to do it wrong except for not doing it. Another door is, we like to go for walks and things, but to really be present with this space, so to see what we're seeing, to feel our feet, every step, walking on the ground, or we can be when we're doing chores, when you're washing dishes. What if that became a sacred practice in a way that you're washing away? Or what if when you're walking or doing something that's sort of your normal thing, you're saying an affirmation or remembering to use kind words or something like that. There's all these little ways that you can just shift the mind chatter into something productive in a peaceful way. Or you could try, not every meal, maybe, but here's a thought. What if you beheld your meal and then consciously chewed and consciously noticed each bite and what it tasted like and the whole experience? Probably not, like I said, something you're going to do every single meal, but something to try, to really be present. And then, of course, when you take any of these steps, you can also notice your body. You know, we like to sometimes pretend that we've got kind of like, we're just like the head and we're just sort of floating around on this, but we're the whole package, right? It all works together. And so to notice, and even if there's discomfort, notice, okay, there's discomfort. It's not a permanent situation. You can do a little prayer treatment on it. But to notice your body and to be really present in your body instead of sort of, I mean, now that we've learned how to walk and run and drive, and we do all of these things very unconsciously. We just sort of use them to get us from one place to another. What would it mean to really notice what each cell is doing? Our breath moving in and out, our heart beating. It's pretty amazing, this suit that we got. And so that brings us to the meditation how-to, because people ask me, so how do I start meditating? Like, there's the big door. Okay, there's no door closed here. It's a big arch. All these are arches, by the way. And so there's lots of ways you can start meditating if meditating is not something you're already into. I recommend starting with something like a daily word, and because it sort of gets us started in that direction. And there's a great little affirmation or a theme. And so read your daily word or your sacred reading, and then just sit and be still. Try to be still. And it's okay if it's only just a few minutes even. It's a few minutes more than you would do if you weren't. A few minutes is good. It's a good place to start. So that's one way into doing it. There's also some great apps for your phone or on the computer that do guided. If you go on YouTube and go look up guided meditations, holy moly, you will not run out. But there's all sorts of tools out there to help support you in taking that next step. But even if it's just noticing your breath in, noticing your breath out, noticing your breath in, noticing your breath out. When you realize the squirrels have come and taken your thoughts away, notice your breath in, notice your breath out. That's all you got to do. And the squirrels will come and take your breath away. You're not trying to create a space where there's nothingness. I mean, that may happen, but that takes lots and lots of practice. And don't let that discourage you if that's not. All you really can do is be grateful if the spaces become bigger. The spaces between thoughts. It's like slowing down the record player of your mind. Most of you know about record players, so that's good. But just slowing it down a little bit. And then as you practice, you remember in the science, in the brain scans, the people who had the most amazing results were the people who had been doing it for thousands and thousands of hours. We don't get there overnight. It's okay. But even the people who did it for just a short period of time consistently started to see results that improved their life. And that's pretty great, right? It's very accessible. We just have to commit. And so I know that just saying, okay, I'm going to sit for 20 minutes is a little rough for some people, because that is used to be one of my favorite excuses for not practicing meditation and mindfulness. So I started with 5 minutes, and then it was 7 minutes, and then it was 10 minutes, and I just sort of kept working my way up because my body got used to sitting for that long, and then it became not a big deal. But there's also so many other doors into allowing ourselves to be present in this moment, and allowing ourselves, really giving ourselves the gift Some of you have also heard me say, 15 minutes is just over 1% of your day. Can you give your 1% of your day to making the rest of your life more peaceful, to having better memory, to being more happy? 1% of your day. That really doesn't sound like a lot, does it? Doesn't to me. 1%. It's just under 15 minutes. I say more is even better, but 1%. We can do that. So, whatever you do, the goal isn't that you'll make that chitter chatter all stop, but that you get to be more aware, that you become the observer, the conscious observer of what's going on, instead of just riding the roller coaster of not knowing what's going on. So, I invite you, I encourage you to engage in spiritual practice, in mindfulness, in meditation. And many of you are. I invite you to take it the next step. What is another deeper level that you could take it to? You have nothing to lose and everything to gain.